What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. In today's episode, I'm going to be going over the teams in the ACC that I think will be contending for bowl eligibility. These are the teams that I think are, towards more of the bottom or middle half of the conference that are going to be competing for bowl eligibility, and I say that nicely because I don't want to say teams that are at the absolute cellar of the conference. Obviously, a couple of teams will fall into that category, but I kind of wanted to group it together that these are the teams that you can expect that when the season wraps up will be fighting for those sixth wins. And obviously, some of those teams won't get to those 6 wins. But before I reveal which teams I think will be falling short of bowl eligibility, which teams will be reaching bowl eligibility, and maybe which teams will be making a little bit more noise than people expect, if you go on to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I post. Without further ado whatsoever, let's get right into it, and kind of starting things up from the bottom up here. I think the team that's going to finish last in the ACC this year is Wake Forest, and I know that might be a little bit of a surprise, but it's also probably what some people are saying. Lindy's Sports Magazine is the one that I use for all these previews. They have really good roster information. They print kind of in late April. Obviously, there are some transfers that happen beyond when they publish, but if those happen, I try to get as much of those, out, in post as I can. But why do I have Wake Forest here at the bottom? I think the Demon Deacons have a really good addition coming in at quarterback. Hank Bachmeier played last season in Louisiana Tech after a couple seasons at Boise State, put up some really solid numbers. In his career, he's thrown for 8,600 yards and 51 touchdowns. And he'll be joined by wide receivers at Wake Forest, Tyler Morin and Donovan Green. Those will be a couple of the guys that he'll be throwing the rock to. This team has 13 starters returning, 5 on offense, 6 on defense, and also their kicker and their punter. On defense, they have linebacker Dylan Hazen coming back, strong safety Nick Anderson. Anderson is a co-captain. And then transfer linebackers Brandon Combs from Southern Illinois, Capone Blue from Kent State. The defensive line is their most accomplished, or maybe experienced is the better word, defensive linemen Jasheen Davis and Kevin Pointer. But this Demon Deacons team averaged fewer than 2 sacks per game last year, which for an entire defensive unit is not very good at all. There are players in college football individually at obviously the best of the best that average about a sack per game. So, less than 2 for a whole team is certainly numbers that are going to need to get up there. I think the ACC, with some of the guys that are transferring in, is going to be a lot more high-powered in the passing game this year. And if you're not able to get anything on those guys, it starts from almost what I would say is kind of like the bottom. They're not quite the bottom of the conference, but like Syracuse getting Kyle McCord, then you work your way up. Grayson McCall at NC State, Cam Ward at Miami, DJ Wagalele at Florida State, and obviously a returner in Cade Klubnik at Clemson. Try to say that 10 times fast. Cade Klubnik at Clemson. All those guys are really good quarterbacks, and that's not even naming all of the quarterbacks this year. So I think Wake Forest is going to struggle in that key area. I also think their schedule is set up unfavorably for them. They open things up with North Carolina A&T, but then they get a couple of tough home games against Virginia and Ole Miss. They go on the road to NC State. They go on the road even to Stanford, at North Carolina, and at Miami. It's not the toughest schedule in the ACC, but it's certainly not easy. Looking ahead now to the team I have just ahead of them, I'm actually going to kind of jump over these guys because I talked about them in my last video. If you haven't seen that, I'll pop it up here to my right, to your left as the audience. Did a preview video on all the ACC newcomers, talked about Stanford. I think the only reason they're ahead, what I like to do in these kind of predictions, I haven't always made it videos. The last couple years I have. I like to go game by game so I get the most accurate predictions in terms of record possible, because when you're just going by records, you're going to have kind of an uneven amount of wins and losses split up. So I go game by game. I think Stanford wins that game against Wake Forest, and so that's why I have the Cardinal coming in at 16th in the ACC. At 15th, I have the Virginia Cavaliers. I think they, by some, are expected to be a little bit more in the middle of the conference, but I think they're going to have some issues. The Cavaliers returned 15 starters, 7 on offense, 6 on defense, and their kicker and punter from a 3-9 team that was 2-6 in the conference. They have a couple of quarterbacks, Tony Muskett and Anthony Colandrea, who set the freshman single-season record for passing yards in a season. Both of those guys are kind of competing. Collectively, they totaled the 46th passing offense nationally last year. They do bring in Chris Tyree, wide receiver from Notre Dame, who had a solid year. Also, Andre Green from North Carolina. I think those are both good additions. Running back Kobe Pace in the backfield, and then they maintain Malachi Fields while bringing back 4 linemen to this offense. I do think, though, when those pieces are coming back to an offense that ranked just 93rd in scoring offense and 105th in rushing offense, 76th in total yardage, I don't know if that's always the best sign, and I think defensively is where more of those issues pop up for the Cavaliers. Defensively, they were middle of the road. They weren't bad against the pass. They were 60th, which could help them stay in some games this year, like I mentioned, against such a strong conference in terms of the pass, like I said, that I think is going to be improved this year. But they ranked 101st in total defense, which is yards per game. They ranked 114th in rushing defense and 116th in scoring defense. Some of the players to watch are defensive end Cam Butler, linebackers Chico Bennett, Cam Robinson, and Corey Thomas, and then safety Jonah Sanker. So Cavaliers I have coming in at 15th in the ACC. Also, like Stanford and Wake Forest at 1-7 in conference play. Then the only team that I have going 2-6 in the conference is the Pittsburgh Panthers. They're coming in from their worst season in 25 years. They were 3-9, 2-6 in the conference. They bring back 11 starters, 7 on offense, 2 on defense, kicker, and punter. They bring in, Pat Narduzzi brings in new offensive coordinator Cade Bell. They also bring back 3 offensive linemen. On offense, the key players to watch are going to be quarterback Nate Yarnell, running backs Rodney Hammond Jr. and Desmond Reed, who's coming into the team and really coming into his own. Wide receiver Konata Mumpfield, and tight end Gavin Bartholomew, and then coming in from Western Carolina, transfer receiver Sensei Lee. A couple of big losses on the defensive side of the ball. I think this is what will hurt them from maybe making bigger strides on that side. Defensive end Dayon Hayes went to Colorado, and linebacker Solomon Shields went to Texas A&M. They do bring in Nate Matlick from Kansas State, who's a good addition, and they retain linebacker Brandon George. The secondary's lone returners are Javon McIntyre and Donovan McMillan. I do think, however, a big game, I do have them, like I said, finishing just 4-8, but if they can steal one earlier in the season, a key game against a team I'll talk about here in a little bit, against Boston College in the season finale, could be a big game. But I'm going to save the Eagles for a couple of other teams from here, because coming in at 13th, and honestly, this one is mostly down to their conference slate. It is the Syracuse Orange. I think Syracuse has a very favorable non-conference slate. They are going to be hosting Ohio, hosting Holy Cross, going to UNLV, who is probably right now, one of the top 3-4 teams in the Mountain West, and then hosting Connecticut. I would be very surprised if they don't go undefeated in that slate. Really, the only loss I can see is probably to UNLV, because that is in Las Vegas. But other than that, they should be pretty solid. However, they face a really tough slate in the ACC, even starting out with Georgia Tech, who I'll talk about here in a second. And they go to NC State on the road, to Boston College, and host Miami. It's manageable. They also host Virginia Tech, who I think is going to be very improved. I'll save them for the next video. But I just think some of the issues that they had last year are still going to plague them. For example, they had -2 turnover margin, and the offensive line has kind of had some issues for several seasons now. And I think that could, if McCord doesn't have the time and protection, I think it could hurt them. But speaking of McCord, he's the quarterback, obviously coming in from Ohio State last year. I think kind of almost unfairly critiqued was McCord. He'll be joining a team that brings back just 4 starters on offense. Overall, the team returns 12, 6 on defense, their kicker and punter. McCord threw for 3,170 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 6 INTs. I know what a lot of people will say is that he didn't deliver with an offense that was stacked, especially with the wide receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr., along with a guy like Emeka Buka. But I think he was efficient. I think this is kind of the type of year where he's a real kind of pro-style quarterback. I think he'll have maybe similar production to what he had at Ohio State last year. Obviously, he doesn't have the same level of talent that he's throwing to, but Syracuse has some good guys on the offensive side. Wide receivers, Zeed Haynes, Justice Reed Simmons, tight end Orande Gazdin II. And then they also have running back LaQuint Allen, who was a 1,000-yard rusher last year with 9 touchdowns. Defensively, they have quite a few guys coming in actually on the defensive line that's led by Khadil Diggs and James Hurd. Diggs coming in from Texas A&M, Hurd from West Virginia. Their linebacker group is led by Marlo Wax and then also Derek McDonald and Anwar Sparrow. All 3 of those guys are returning starters. Cornerback, they have Devin Grant coming in from Buffalo. A couple of safeties, Justin Barron and Elijah Clark. And then some of the other transfers that they have coming in, Deion Wilson Jr. from New Mexico State, Isaiah Hastings from Alabama, and then junior college signee Michael Wokocha, and even a couple of other guys in the secondary include Deuce Chestnut from LSU and Clarence Lewis from Notre Dame. Fran Brown takes over as head coach. I think this is a team that could find their way into that contention. I just think maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just a feeling that I have, or just the fact that they haven't really been able to put a full season together aside from a couple years ago. I have the Orange coming in at 13th in the conference. Number 12, I have Cal. Again, if you want to see my other video, breakdown of the Golden Bears, you could check out that one. It's my most recent video before this video. Coming in at number 11 is a team that I think some people expect to take a step back because they're losing head coach Mike Elko to Texas A&M, but that's the Duke Blue Devils. I actually think they are one of the teams that might surprise some people this year. I think they've got a good shot to potentially, maybe not make noise in the conference, but certainly reach bowl eligibility. So for the Blue Devils, again, gone is Mike Elko, the head coach, to Texas A&M. Quarterback Riley Leonard is going to Notre Dame. Running back Jordan Waters is going to NC State. They return 9 starters as a team, 4 on offense, 4 on defense, and their kicker. I do kind of like their quarterback situation. Malik Murphy comes in from Texas. He had a couple okay games filling in for Quinn Ewers last year for the Longhorns, but I think that was kind of difficult to be thrust into those moments. I think he'll benefit from having opportunities here. He'll be competing with Grayson Loftus. And then also on offense, Jaquez Moore, and once quarterback, now wide receiver Jordan Moore. They do only have one offensive lineman returning. From a team that went 8-5 and 4-4, I don't think the offense even was the strength of this team, and I don't think it will be. But I think defense is where the Blue Devils could cause some issues for their opponents in the ACC. They bring in Manny Diaz as head coach, a guy who has done a fantastic job at numerous places, or at least a couple places, as a defensive coordinator. I think he'll just further solidify the strength that Duke has. Again, they have a top 50 defense. In points per game allowed, they ranked 16th nationally and first in the ACC with just 19 points per game allowed. The key guys to watch are defensive end Wesley Williams, linebacker Trey Freeman, cornerback Chandler Rivers, and then safeties Terry Moore and Jalen Stinson. So again, I think the Blue Devils have a chance to kind of, work their way up the ladder in the ACC. Obviously, technically speaking, it would be a step back from last year, because I have them going 6-6 and 3-5 in the conference, versus in the regular season they were 7-5 and 4-4. So it's a one-game step back in a first year as a head coach. It's not the worst thing. I think that would give an opportunity for Manny Diaz to potentially grow this program even further. Coming in at number 10, again, a team that I've already previewed. This is a team that I think is just outside that contention for even playing for the conference. That's SMU, the Mustangs coming in, the reigning American Conference champions. I think they go 8-4 and 4-4. And then moving on along, two more teams that I have going 4-4 in conference are Georgia Tech and Boston College. So first, going over the Yellow Jackets, they went 7-6, 5-3 last year in conference. They get 16 starters coming back, 7 on offense, 7 on defense, and both of their kicker and punter. Haynes King is a good quarterback. He's a very good dual threat quarterback. Threw for 2,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, ran for over 600 more yards and 9 touchdowns, but he did throw 16 interceptions. And I think that's something, of course, it can be improved and corrected, and I would hope and maybe even expect for Georgia Tech's sake that it does improve a little bit, but that is something that even if he doesn't throw as many this year, maybe he throws one in a key moment in a game where the Yellow Jackets have a chance to pull an upset against a team that's ahead of them in the standings. I think that maybe could drag him down a little bit. Joining King on offense is running back Jamal Haynes, and then wide receivers Eric Singleton and Malik Rutherford, along with Leo Blackburn, who is coming back from an ACL injury. They bring in a new defensive coordinator, Tyler Santucci from Texas A&M. On defense, defensive tackle Zeke Biggers, linebacker Kyle Eifert, cornerback Amari Harvey, and safety LaMiles Brooks are the key guys to watch in that unit. I have Georgia Tech again finishing 6-6, 4-4 in conference. And finally, the final team in kind of this fighting for bowl eligibility is Boston College. I have them going 6-6 and 4-4 in conference. Again, mentioned earlier, that game on November 30th against Pitt could be huge. It's very possible both those teams go into it 5-6. I have Boston College at 5-6, Pitt at 4-7. The Eagles were thrust into kind of unexpected change when Jeff Hafley took the defensive coordinator position with the Green Bay Packers. Coming in to coach will be Bill O'Brien. He did obviously a fantastic job coming into an even more tumultuous situation with Penn State after the Jerry Sandusky scandal. He delivered a couple of winning seasons for the Nittany Lions and then parlayed that into success in the NFL with the Houston Texans winning 4 straight divisions before a winless start in 2020 booted him out of Houston. So this Boston College team has probably just talked about a real dual threat quarterback in Haynes King at Georgia Tech. They might have an even better one. Thomas Castellanos, rushed for over 1,100 yards, 13 touchdowns. I think both of those were near or were Boston College records, single-season records for a quarterback. He threw for 2,200 yards, 15 touchdowns. Although, again, like King, had issues with turnovers. He had 14. Again, I think that's something that could keep Boston College from stepping forward even more in the conference. He'll be able to throw to Lewis Bond and Texas Tech transfer Jorand Bradley. And then the Eagles have a couple of really good offensive linemen, tackle Ozzie Trapelo and guard Logan Taylor, for a unit that overall was the 13th best rush offense in the nation last year. Defensively, they have edge rusher Donovan Eziraku, cornerback Amari Jackson, who leads a unit that ranked 26th nationally in passing defense last year. But a couple of kind of glaring areas that they need to improve is they were 118th against the rush last year, and they totaled just 13 sacks. So that is my kind of, I guess it's kind of works out almost perfectly. It's the bottom half of the ACC. That would be, again, kind of in reverse order from 17 up through 8. Couple teams that I'll talk about in my next video that are just outside of this group are North Carolina, maybe North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, and SMU is kind of a fringe. I just had them at 10 because of, I think, a tiebreaker. I think I have them losing that game, the game that they have against, I believe, Boston College. But SMU is a team that can also compete. I'll go over in my next video the teams that I expect to really have a chance to seriously compete for the ACC. I think there's a couple of top dogs, but I think there's a couple of teams that could make a little bit of noise and have a chance to potentially see some improvement and have a chance to compete for the ACC crown. But Again, kind of running through quickly from 17 to 8 in the conference. Wake Forest, bottom up. Wake Forest, Stanford, Virginia, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Cal, Duke, SMU, Georgia Tech, and Boston College. But let me know your thoughts on which teams will be able to get bowl eligibility, which teams will fall short, and let me know what you think of my predictions in the comments down below. But if you've watched to this point in the video, thank you so much for taking the time to watch College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.